Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Francesa on The Fan here at 1:23 on a day that, as we will say and remember forever, will be a day that will live in infamy as one did many years ago. I'm going to take over now here on WFAN on a day that has nothing to do with sports and has everything to do with real life and a reality that we probably never even dreamed of or never even feared in this country has come true today in almost staggering proportion. And as the Eyewitness in the morning crew moves out after basically putting on a tremendous performance till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we're almost 5 hours now into this devastation. And at this hour, we are a nation in a state of emergency. I mean, in a nation almost in a state of panic. And the armed forces are on the highest possible alert, both in the United States and around the world. The threat condition Delta is the highest that can be ever put into operation, and that means it's the same as a state of war, and that's what we are at right now, I think, is in a state of war until it is discovered. I think probably by now our country and our intelligent people know who they want to blame for what happened here and how they will go about retaliating or making their statement to the world, which will have to be done in very quick order. We will watch as that unfolds. But the first things first is to secure our nation, which has probably been done by now, and to try and see if we can save the people who can be saved, although the toll here in the United States, especially in our city, and in places and on airplanes and in Washington, D.C., and in the Pentagon building, and in maybe places yet unknown, because we don't know that all the devastation is done. There could be something else that still comes our way, maybe not in the way of an airliner, but in the way of some kind of other terrorist action today. Will take a toll into the many thousands here on a day that, as we said, unlike any other ever in our country. And this was the point that struck me, and I want to make a couple points before we start getting into whatever news we can update for you this afternoon here on The Fan, and we will all afternoon. And that is that I never thought we would see this day. And I thought that, you know, when you watch things like all these World War II movies that have been done, Spielberg and Hanks and the stuff, and you see how people in Europe were devastated during wars, or see countries that live with this and what they live in with the Middle East, with bombs over their head and bombs in their living room and stuff, and we've never even dealt with any soldiers in their streets, and we've never dealt with anything like that until today, when we really have been attacked. Not attacked by a formal nation, but attacked by a group, probably a group of terrorists that we know by now their identity. And maybe they're mobile, and maybe they move around the world, and maybe they're very liquid in form, but still they're devastating and powerful in form, and they want to attack us. And they finally have, in a devastating way, far greater than we ever thought possible in this country. Now, as I drove in a couple hours ago, a couple things I want to say about that. Number one, if you are in Nassau County, in Queens today, get off the roads. Because what's happening here is you're just clogging things up. Don't be driving anywhere today that you don't have to drive. Because there are so many people trying to move emergency vehicles and move police and move rescue people and emergency people and hospital people into New York City now to help, that you're just clogging things up for them. And it was a mess even around here in Queens, just a total mess. And you don't want to be involved anyway. And the other thing that annoyed me was the tempest flaring. I mean, if there's ever a day, that we as a people have to just, you know, pull together. You can't have this happening and see the smoke billowing, and I see guys getting out of their cars and start a fist fight in the street. I mean, come on. You know, get a grip on what's going on. Take a little look at the bigger picture. You know, the cops don't need that going on when, you know, they're trying to usher people in to help people who may be bleeding to death in New York City. So just get out of the way and let people help, and just basically go home. And watch this on TV and be with the people, you know, that you love and your families, and just hope that we've seen the end of it and we can move on and kind of rebuild what's already happened, because our nation's been attacked and our city has been devastated. I mean, to see those buildings drop, I mean, there's no way you could watch that and not be just horrified, not just feel it in the pit of your stomach to see those buildings, which have been, you know, monuments to what we've erected, not just in the city, but in this country, in terms of business and finance and the society we have. To see them drop to the ground in a matter of minutes tells you how vulnerable things are and how vulnerable and fleeting life can be. So just, you know, get a grip, get out of the way, and let the people who have to work. Now, the New York blood supplies are extremely low, so if you're within walking distance of a hospital and you're healthy, go give some blood. Elmhurst Hospital has called in Jackson Heights. They need blood. They can get it transported to the city. Now, wait, you're not. I don't want you to get in your car and drive somewhere to give blood, but if you can go give blood, go give it, because that's one thing you can do to help. They're starting to open up service a little bit now. They have limited service, subway service. We'll get you up to date on that. The bridges are still closed, though. You can't go near Manhattan. Don't drive in it. Don't drive into it. You're not getting in. If you're in your car, just be patient. It's going to be slow. You'll get home, but just be patient. I mean, you just got to realize, I mean, everyone's trying to go in the same direction, and it took me, 2.5 hours to get into the station. And basically, it took me 15 minutes to get within a mile of the station, and it took me an hour and a half to get 1 block. You just got to take your time. Now, if you're just joining us, well, I know you're up to date on everything, so I don't have to go through the timeline right now of what happened today. I'm sure you're very well aware what happened. And where we are right now is we're just trying, I think, to settle down a little bit in this country, especially in this city, kind of secure our own defenses and our own borders and our own city, hopefully get the people who can be saved and get them healthy and get them back to a hospital and get them patched up, the ones that can be saved. And unfortunately, we are going to dig out a lot of people who didn't make it. Maybe thousands of them. Thousands, it looks like. And there's a lot of stuff to be discussed here in the days to come, but that's for the days to come. What this means in terms of how it's going to change this country. And it's going to change it a lot. Security, airline security, total security in cities is going to change dramatically. But that's for another day. Warner Wolf, you've heard him with Eyewitness this morning. He lives down in that area. You've heard him talking about it a little bit. He lives 7 blocks from the Trade Center. He's walked around the area as close as he could get, and he joins us now. Warner, how close can you get to the devastation down there?
You can get pretty close to it because people are walking away from it now. But it's blocked off. The interesting thing to me, Mike, was that if you go the other way toward Canal Street north, right, if you try to get back, you have to show some identification. I mean, that's kind of unheard of in this country, to get back in your own neighborhood.
Well, Warner, what about I heard you talking before about the building that might be on fire behind where the 2 towers were. Is that seem to be under control now? It
seems like, although the smoke is still billowing, I mean, it's not as black as it was, which my understanding is if it's not as black and it turns white, it means the water has doused it a little bit. So I assume that building is, I don't know what's left of it because I can't see from behind it, in front of it. I can't see behind this building. But
Warner, when I was coming in from Long Island, I was talking with Warner Wolf, I saw them just ushering busload after busload of help people, of Nassau cops, of emergency people. I mean, busload after busload being ushered in on the highways into the city. So there must just be thousands of cops, firemen, rescue workers in that. There must be thousands of them in that area.
Yes, thousands. Volunteers, everything. And most of the people, you see them, they have masks on, the surgeon masks, because the smoke is horrible. But you have to, gosh, is this really happening? When you look, if you're on Hudson Street and you look south, all you see is a tunnel of smoke, and you can see where the Twin Towers used to be. I mean, the way I would phrase it, it's almost like when you're used to seeing something each morning, you can't help it. You open the blinds and there it is. First of all, you want to look at it. It's such an imposing structure. And then when you go to bed, we would always look at it. And now I'm looking and it's not there. I mean, it's
almost like they took
surreal.
These terrorists took those and they've targeted those buildings for so long. They took those buildings down because of what those buildings symbolize to them, really what America is.
Absolutely.
And that's why they targeted those buildings. And somewhere in the world, those terrorists, they love the fact that they took those buildings down in front of the world. They probably were watching when they took them down.
Absolutely. You've hit that right on the nose. Absolutely. What's interesting, in 1945, you might remember a U.S. bomber accidentally ran into the Empire State Building. People were killed, but the Empire State Building stayed. And I think, like you say, that the people think, well, you can't take these buildings down. It's impossible, and they did stand for something. There was no question about it.
Want to hold me for 1 second? I'll get back to Warner Wolf in 1 second. I want to get to Lori on the traffic here. Lori, they just handed me a little note which says, and this is something that everyone can relate to, as you drive into the city from anywhere, you see those blinking lights now on every bridge and every road, and today they just blink. New York City is closed. I mean,
Right.
they've never blinked those before, ever. Where are we now with all the different highways and access roads and mass transit? Where are we right now?
Well, Mike, you still cannot get into Manhattan on any bridge or tunnel. Everything is shut down. You can get into Queens. There's limited service on the A, E, and F trains. So if you want to get into Manhattan, you can take one of those trains. You may have to wait a long time to get one, but they are running in both directions now. Jersey-bound Bayonne, Goethals, and Outer Bridge has been reopened. Heading into Staten Island, though, they're still shut down. On the Verrazano, you can go into Staten Island, but you can't go into Brooklyn. That side is also closed. One ferry is still in operation. It's the Waterway Ferry. It leaves from Manhattan on 30th Street, Pier 11. That'll take you to Hoboken. Other than that, George Washington Bridge, Holland and Lincoln Tunnel still shut down both directions. They're not even sporadically opening that upper deck.
When I was driving in on the Grand Central, it looked like rush hour going out the other way. So I would think a lot of people have already most of the people who work there probably have already gotten out of the city. I mean, at least a lot of them already gotten out of the city.
That's true. There's still a parking lot on the south
Well,
end.
turned around, they heard it on the news, driving in and turned around
Right.
and headed out 9:30 this morning.
That's true. Some of the places where they are just stuck because they can't turn around, Deegan ramps at the George, southbound 95, all the way going down the Cross Bronx approaching the George, they're just sitting there.
They had them turned around, where I was, they had them turned around coming the wrong way on the highway. They're trying to take them back that way,
Well, that's
off the Triborough. I mean, that's how bad it was, but it was hours backed up, and you could see people losing their temper, but you can't, I mean, today is a day, folks. You know, think about the people who lost their lives. You're worried about being in traffic. I mean, get a grip.
Really? Priorities.
Jeez. Thanks, Lori.
Okay.
Let me get back to Warner. And Warner, I hate to even get this, get to this point, but it gets so gruesome. I mean, do you see physical devastation? I mean, did you see people injured? Did you?
No, I didn't.
I mean, did you see anything that looked like there was just a catastrophe all over the place down there?
No, I didn't get down that far. But from as far as I could get, just the sight of all you see on a street are policemen and firemen and police cars and fire trucks and smoke just billowing. I've never seen anything. Well, actually, I did one other time. Not to this extent, though, but it's just, I'll tell you, Mike, I don't think I'll ever get this out of my mind, and what still sticks in my head are, I saw people jumping.
Oh.
And at first, I didn't know they were people.
Oh.
I thought it was just debris, but I noticed that the debris went down a different way than a body, and just, oh man, I'll tell you.
There's no words for it.
No, and it just went from bad to worse, because the first thing was after the, about 10 of 9. We live about 10 blocks from where the World Trade Center was. And that plane, I said to my wife, boy, that plane is low. Well, it flew right over our apartment. And then I would say 5 seconds later, boom, I mean, an explosion. We said, what the hell what was that? My wife opened the windows and she said, oh my God, there's a hole in the World Trade Center. And just to see that, geez, oh God, like, how could that happen? So your first thought was, well, gosh, I guess, what an accident. A plane, for whatever reason, had trouble and accidentally hit the World Trade Center. And that's what I think anybody that at that time thought that's what it was. But then, well, 18 minutes later, and see, that was from the north side going south, so
right.
that's what I was seeing. But then, from the south, the other plane came and hit the other tower. And then, of course, you knew, well, there's no way 2 planes are going to go off course. You knew what this was. This was an absolute terrorist attack. And then watching, you know, I can still see the buildings. The one on the right was there was more smoke out of it coming out, rising to the top. And then I remember on the phone with Imus, I said, you know what? The color has turned, and now it's all black. And not being a fireman, I don't know what that means, what the ramifications are. But then it collapsed. And Mike, I mean, I'm talking about the first tower. To see it come down is, you know, am I watching? Am I here? Is this real? And then, oh God! And then the second one. I mean, you're talking about a 110-story building,
A quarter of a mile high.
quarter of a mile high.
And not only that, just the amount of just the people and the people in the area.
Oh,
I mean,
God.
it's something that's almost unfathomable. I mean, it really is to be that close to it. And, you know, down there, you know, that whole community is built around those buildings. I mean,
Yeah.
it always has been. The whole image of that area is built around those buildings.
Right. You know, I hope the younger people in the audience do understand that sometimes if people don't follow history, well, you know, the whole thing is history. Like you said, this is the first time this soil, the United States,
Has ever been attacked?
at this magnitude.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, the first
Absolutely.
time.
This is like war. I mean, this
Yes.
is an act of war today. If this were a nation that did this to us, we'd already be at war.
Yes.
So that's why I think we have to take the same kind of approach, because although it's not a nation, it's kind of a fluid nation of terrorists that have to be dealt with now, because this is a full-scale attack.
Of course. And I mean,
Not easy to find them, though. I mean, they don't have, it's not like you can just go press a button and find them. That's the problem.
exactly. That's a problem. It's like this country did it, so let's go get them. You're absolutely right.
I want to check back if you have
Okay.
anything.
Thank
That's
you.
Warner Wolf. Let's go to Christy from the Eyewitness in the Morning program. Christy, go ahead.
Hi, Mike. We've been monitoring the wires and keeping track of what's going on now. Unfortunately, a lot of the experts have been saying that, you know, we may not have seen the last of this. I mean, it's frightening to think. But what's coming over the wires now, apparently there are bomb threats coming into different parts of the country. Niagara Falls Airport reporting that they just received bomb threats. Police and special bomb-sniffing canines have been called in to check the area there. And from what we understand, all flights at the Niagara Falls Airport and other flights throughout the U.S. and Canada grounded until at least 6 o'clock local time this evening. And that, of course, is Eastern time. And also a report that a building in downtown Nashville was being evacuated because of a bomb threat. So, you know...
I think, unfortunately, we're going to get a lot of that now that's not even going to be real, you know, because this thing was so well organized and happened in such a short time that I think this strike probably already took place. I think this is now probably people, you know how there's a lot of crazies out there probably
Right.
calling in bomb threats, which you now have to go check out.
Exactly.
But I think that these guys were so well organized with, this was probably years in the making.
Sure.
That it happened so quick and they almost did everything they wanted to do, with a couple of exceptions. Those 2 planes were probably downed by fighter planes. We're going to find out, unfortunately, which might offend some people in this country, but they were probably headed for, you know, the White House.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that was a wave that's probably over.
Well, we hope.
I would think, anyway. I mean, I would think that the people who did this were the real, you know, terrorist groups, and I think we know pretty much, I think we all think we know who did it, but we can't prove it, but let's see what they say later on today. But I think there's a lot of I've heard coming in, you know, schools were saying that they had bomb threats, and
Right.
weird places were saying that. Now, they weren't going to pick some little place. I mean, they're bombing the Pentagon. You're not going to bomb some high school.
Right,
They're bombing
right.
the Pentagon. You know, so I think you're going to hear a lot of that stuff that's unfortunately going to have to be checked out, which isn't going to prove fruitful, I think, in a lot of places.
We sure hope. Yeah, definitely. I think you're right that you were talking about it being planned years in advance. Like, how did these folks, you know, able to get whatever they had, guns or bombs, into the
They
air,
had to
you
have
know,
people working on the airline.
in place? Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely, for years.
Also, we've got reports that military warships out of Norfolk, aircraft carriers being moved in to, of course, help cover the airspace around New York and Washington, D.C.
The JFK and
yes,
the George Washington. Yep.
So that's going to try to be, you know, as close into D.C. as they can get. And evidently, First Lady Laura Bush has been whisked away by security and is in seclusion. So there's, you know, a lot of different things developing right now. And Yasser Arafat has come out sending his condolences to the United States. And, of course, that's going to begin now, the discussion of who's responsible.
Well, and no one has claimed responsibility. I don't know if someone wants to claim responsibility for this one. Because this one, if you claim it, you might wind up erased. Exactly. Because you're going to have a hard time hiding if you claim this one.
Right. Earlier today, we were reporting this, that Abu Dhabi television, evidently an anonymous caller called there and said a radical Palestinian group was responsible for the attacks, but then the group later denied any involvement. So I think that's going to be just an ongoing development of, of course, trying to find out who is behind this.
Well, there's going to be one name that's, if the people who spend their life on this are all going to say the same name.
Osama bin Laden.
Because he's the only one who has the resources to do something like this. So, I mean, I'm sure wherever the Joint Chiefs are meeting and the CIA people are meeting and, Rice is and Powell are, wherever they're flying to and meeting, that's the name that's on the tip of everybody's tongue. And where is he? Supposedly in Afghanistan, and I think they might want to find out where he is in a hurry.
Right. Colin Powell, I know, was on his way back from Peru, and Condoleezza Rice was in D.C. So, and the last that we heard from Bush was in Louisiana.
Which I'm sure will be moved again now.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Christy.
All right, we're going to go update this, and we'll keep you posted.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to keep you updated on everything going on. We have the resources to go to everywhere, NBC News, CBS, MSNBC, with any breaking news. There'll be some stuff during the day. Again, there'll be updates from the government as we hear. We'll keep you up to date on stuff that's going on. Senator McCain obviously called this an act of war, which I agree. Clearly an act of war carried out in the United States. You have to pinpoint now who declared the act of war. That's why. I mean, that's why this is a little more fluid. If this were a country that had done this, we would have been at war 10 minutes later. But the question is now, who do you declare war on? You're going to declare war on a terrorist group? You got to prove they did it. You got to have, and they'll probably be able to do that. Then you got to find them. What country is hiding them? And that's going to be an interesting take on how we exactly go about that and how we address the world with that situation. Back after this.
WFAN New York.
Francesa on the fan at 1:50 on a day unlike any other we've ever experienced in this country as New York tries to dig out and see if it can open up a little bit. Let's go to Lori and let her update us on what's going on. Lori?
Okay, Mike, Long Island Railroad now has some eastbound service from Penn Station. You can get out of the city, nothing westbound. Metro North also has trains now leaving Grand Central, limited amount, but you can get out of Manhattan from Grand Central, nothing coming into Manhattan. Holland Lincoln Tunnels, George Washington Bridge closed both ways. You do have some limited service on the A, E, and F subways that will take you into Manhattan and through Manhattan. Triborough, Throgs Neck, bridges closed going into the Bronx. Open Queensbound. Whitestone Bridge still closed in both directions. There is no Amtrak service between New York and Washington and no Amtrak going into Penn Station. Southbound BQE, very heavy and slow moving, extremely heavy. Southbound Belt going to the Verrazano, bumper to bumper from Cross Bay Boulevard all the way down to the Verrazano. And at the Verrazano, you can get into Staten Island. Brooklyn bound, it's still closed. Jersey bound, Bayonne, Goethals, they're open, but Staten Island bound, they remain shut down. And that's the update for this time.
Thank you, Lori. And the blood supplies in New York obviously are very low with all the injuries today. Now, the hospitals need blood, as you know, and if you're within walking distance. Now, right now, and this doesn't mean later on don't go give it, but wait a little while, because fortunately there are enough good people out there that there is a waiting line right now to give blood. At some of the hospitals, especially the one here in Queens at Elmhurst Hospital, and that people are showing up to give blood. So right now, back off and wait a little while, because there is a wait of maybe an hour or two to give blood, which means there's enough people there who are chipping in as you would expect, and that's what you hope people do at a time like this. I mean, this is a time that you become one city, become one country. That's all there is to it. I mean, that's what you do when you have this kind of catastrophe. And this is a national state of emergency. This is a national catastrophe. There's nothing short. I mean, don't be surprised if we have some major military announcements by this evening. I would not be surprised by anything that happened today after what we've seen. Now, I didn't hear all of this morning. Ro came in and told me Susan was on the phone with Imus, and she was describing what was going on, and that's when I turned it on, because I was on the phone with my accountant, and he told me, did you see what happened at the World Trade Center? Turn the TV on, and I did, and then I heard the whole thing and kind of turned on the radio, and Susan's still here, but she can't go anywhere. And now, Susan, I didn't hear the whole thing, so kind of take me through it.
Well, if you were going towards Manhattan at about 9 o'clock this morning, you actually saw it unfold in front of you. Terrifying, Mike, because you feel like you're watching a movie, and something in your mind doesn't connect that it's really going on. About 9 o'clock, I got to a point at the Bruckner where I could see the World Trade Center, and it's a gorgeous day and not a cloud in the sky, and I actually saw one of the the buildings, the smoke piling out of there. And that was the first I had really heard about it. And as I was stopped in traffic, and there was just humongous traffic, obviously, on the Bruckner going towards the Triborough, and people there, and about 15 minutes later, I was describing the event to my mother on the phone back in Boston, and I actually saw a plane come from the Hudson side of the river, and I saw the plane go into the building, and this fireball explode out of that building. And you don't believe in your heart what you have seen. It's just an awful, awful feeling. And then, of course, you see that the police are moving you over, and you have very quiet and single file over the Triborough Bridge. But you people that were coming to work in Manhattan, coming from the north, actually saw it unfold, because you had some shot, some view with this gorgeous day. And I remember saying to Imus, calling in and talking about the plane, and he asked me how big the plane was, and I said, I don't know planes, but it wasn't a little plane. It wasn't a Cessna. It looked like a real jet. It was a real jet. And if you look at it, and you look at the timeline that went on, the 4 planes hijacked, the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, the military going on high alert, airports closed, and everything. And as you said, this day is not going to be over, and we're not going to go back to work and have a wonderful day tomorrow. Things have changed forever in this country.
As far as security and stuff, which we don't even want to get into now because there's too much to do. There's too many people to help. There's too many things to dig out. There's too many, unfortunately, people to bury. There's too much to do, especially in this city. But this will change the way we live. And there's been this ongoing threat for a long time, since the last World Trade Center, the World Trade Towers and the whole thing that went on years ago, which was Bin Laden, okay, who this was, I don't want to, throw it out there yet before everybody else. I mean, I know what people have speculated. This is Bin Laden again. I mean, you'd bet 10 to 1 it is, because it was so brilliantly organized. The government cannot believe how well organized this one. He's the only one who could organize something of this nature in this country.
Because of the war chest, because of the remarkable places he has. And I remember
I was probably putting people in place 5 years.
I was flashing back this morning as I was sitting in the car, and I remember listening to some of the trial 8 years ago. And if you were around at the World Trade Center bombing, you remember the trial, and it was mesmerizing. And I remember the speculation then, the case the government was trying to make against these men, was that the plan was because they believed that the World Trade Center was a symbol of everything that was America.
It is. To them it is.
And back then, what they wanted to do, and this was the plan, was to blow up one...
Susan, hold me 1 second. We got to go to Brokaw. Something's going on. Let's go to NBC News. All right, that was Tom Brokaw with Neil Livingston, who is a terrorism expert. And really what he's telling you is that this was such a sophisticated deployment of terrorism around the country, really the government's greatest fear, that there would be multiple sites, multiple times, and the only thing that lacked, to our betterment was that they would use a weapon of mass destruction, which fortunately has not happened. But what they did, which was obviously something that was not considered feasible or any plan that was considered to be high risk, is they took American commercial airlines and used them as their weapons, and they knew they couldn't fly a plane into our airspace. They can't do that. You can't get a plane through. You can't get it, but you can get a commercial airline through, because that goes on all the time, and they don't check them. And now you got them flying around the country. They also took planes that were headed from the East Coast to California, so they had large amounts of fuel, and they were large planes. And obviously this deployment was done in a way that was absolutely, you hate to say it, but brilliant. I mean, this was an incredible deployment of force in our country in a short amount of time. I mean, had to be worked on. They said a year. This had to be worked on 5 years. I mean, they had to have people on the inside. You don't know how they got in the cockpit of these planes. Did they have people who were personnel on the plane? Did they have a pilot on the plane? Did they have a co-pilot on the plane? Who knows who they had? Before I get back to Susan, just let me run through the timeline real quickly if you're joining us. 8:42 this morning, as Susan was alluding to as an eyewitness, the attacks start with the first hijacked plane that hits the South Tower. At 9:03, the first people were running around wondering if it was an accident, something crazy. Did a pilot have a heart attack? Who knew what was going on then? Second one hits, and you know that this is without question an attack of terrorism. At 9:03, the second one hits the North Tower. At the time, around 9:40, a third plane crashes amazingly into the Pentagon And there's been reports there have been fatalities there, and almost penetrates the inner rings of the Pentagon, which was considered to be technically impossible. They almost penetrated, these 5 rings almost penetrated the inner rings of the Pentagon, and Washington, D.C. then goes into a code red, which means they clear out the Capitol, they clear out everybody of importance in the city, they hide everybody. They were not bringing the president back here. The president was in Sarasota. Everyone said he was flying back to Washington. There was no way. Now, when he's in the air on Air Force One, that's a situation room anyway. He can fly in the air and deploy everything he needs to deploy around the world. They take his cabinet to a specific place. He went to Louisiana. Everybody was scattered around. Then at 9:59, the South Tower collapses, reportedly with people still inside, is just as horrific as that sounds. And then at 10:28, the North Tower collapses. So, and then, of course, we find out that there's another hijacked plane, 2 others. One, obviously, that had landed, into the Pentagon, and then one, obviously, that crashed in Pennsylvania, which everyone assumes was headed for the Capitol or headed for a big building in Washington, and was probably taken down by our own Air Force, which is a distinct possibility. We are now in a national state of emergency. New York is digging out from a devastation. The city is closed. The armed forces are on the highest possible alert, which is threat condition Delta, and that means that we are, in essence, at war. I mean, there's nothing short of that, and something this country, the Gulf War was basically a small move in terms of military force compared to what's going on in the world right now. Probably not since the Cuban Missile Crisis has there been probably the kind of deployment that there is right now in the world of American force around the world, and it's going to be interesting in these next 24 hours exactly what happens, and that's where we stand right now. As far as the city, we'll keep you up to date. Don't drive if you don't have to. If you got home, just be happy you did. If you're still in the city, be patient, and hopefully it'll start to open up little by little, and we're going to have to dig out of this devastation, and this is going to be one that's going to be felt forever, for a long, long time to come. Let's, before I get back to Susan, let me get to Christy, and Christy, go ahead.
Yeah, Mike, we actually just found something over the wire kind of interesting. Of course, prior to these attacks today in New York and Washington, Timothy McVeigh's destruction in Oklahoma City
which almost seems like a ripple now.
Exactly, 168 Americans dead in that one, of course, and today we don't even want to speculate on what the fatalities may be. But his father, Bill McVeigh, says that he watched in shock as the coverage unfolded on the tragedies. He said that he was finishing a round of golf this morning, and he watched the coverage on television from his home in Pendleton, which is near Buffalo. He declined to make any comparisons between today's attack and Oklahoma City. He said, quote, "I don't want to get into that." So, that was kind of an interesting little side note. And also, this just came over, that United Flight 93 that crashed in western Pennsylvania. Apparently, there is a terrifying account by a passenger aboard that flight. He was able to go into the bathroom, lock the door, and make an emergency call on his cell phone. And it went into the dispatcher, an emergency dispatcher, and the man said, we're being hijacked, kind of frantically, just before that plane crashed. And
it must have been close to the ground, otherwise the cell phone wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, well, it's apparently taken from the transcript.
That's he would have to be. It would almost have to be in the last
right before
seconds,
they crashed.
because if you're up too high, they don't work.
Let's see. Okay, the flight was headed from Newark to San Francisco, and the crash happened near Somerset County Airport, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh.
Plus, that call, which I find skeptical for this reason too, because we kind of think that plane was probably either forced down or shot down, because it was headed, according to officials in Pennsylvania and Virginia, for a Washington building, the Capitol, White House, Camp David. So that was probably either forced down or shot down by our own Air Force. I don't know if that guy would, that one I'm a little skeptical.
You're going to get all kinds of things that people are going to say, because anybody
I'm not saying it's wrong.
an airplane.
That's a pretty reliable source.
That one
could have gone into the dispatch. It doesn't mean he was on the plane.
True.
He could have, someone could have phonied it in there too. Who knows? But that one I'm a little skeptical of, only because we don't even know what happened to that plane yet. That plane could have been blown up in the air. We don't even know yet.
There is one interesting thing that just came over the wire, Mike and Christie. A Pentagon spokesman confirming that Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld was in the Pentagon when the plane struck the building, and Rumsfeld evidently is okay and help people get out of the building.
Well,
so
evidently
he was there.
The big offices of the power brokers is on the other side of the Pentagon. They hit the wrong side of the building, so that's one thing they did wrong with their intelligence. They actually hit the side of the building that does not have the decision makers in it. They are on the other side of the Pentagon. So while they did probably, reportedly, we don't know for factual yet, but they did reportedly kill people in the Pentagon, they did not kill the decision makers who were on the other side of the building.
Evidently, that part of the Pentagon that was hit, too, had just undergone some renovations or, some expansion, and so it's really hard to believe, the whole thing.
All right, let me get to the president here. He spoke for a couple of minutes from Louisiana, where they ushered him off after he left Sarasota, and let's hear President Bush. President Bush in Louisiana. Now, you're going to find out, people have been wondering, people have been questioning George Bush. What kind of person is he? How bright is he? This and that. About the election. People unhappy the way the whole thing was solved. Supreme Court, the whole deal. You're going to find out now whether this man can lead the country. Because this is when you find out. There are 4 or 5 times when you're the president of the country, you got to lead. This is it. This is what it comes down to. And you're either going to step up or you're basically not going to have a grip on the country anymore. That you're either going to take hold of the whole deal or you're not. And you're going to find out in the next 48 hours whether George Bush is going to be a strong president or not. That's what you're going to find out. Now, he has not been inspiring the 2 times I've seen him today. I don't want to get on him. I'm sure he's getting a lot of information. I don't want to be disparaging of the president this time, but, I mean, he has not been awe-inspiring so far, and he has not shown a lot of anger, which is very surprising, considering the devastation and the attack that this country is under. And to put him in front of a bunch of children this morning when the country's under attack was one of the mindless things I've ever seen. But listen, that's more about content than anything right now. Let's get to Lori on what's going on with the way in and out of the city. There isn't too many ways into the city right now. Go ahead, Lori.
You're right, Mike, and there are no ways into Manhattan from any approach. Those A, E, and F trains, once again suspended, so you can't take those going into Manhattan. Also, no trains are running around Manhattan. A couple of buses still going up and down the avenues, but very limited service. Holland, Lincoln Tunnels, George Washington Bridge closed both ways. Triborough, Whitestone, Throgsneck Bridges closed going into the Bronx. They're open Queenstown. At the Verrazano heading into Staten Island, it is open. Tolls are not being collected. Brooklyn bound, it's closed. If you're trying to get to the Verrazano, though, the southbound belt, bumper to bumper back to Cross Bay Boulevard, southbound BQE, also very heavy and slow moving, extremely heavy. On Metro North, you can get a train at Grand Central. Nothing's coming into Manhattan. On the Long Island Railroad, you've got a limited amount of trains leaving Penn Station. They are leaving Penn Station, none coming into Manhattan, and there's limited ferry service leaving Manhattan from Pier 11 at West 30th Street, and that will take you to Hoboken.
I'm Mike. Thank you, Lori. I'm Mike Francesa. This is the Mike and the Mad Dog program on a very different day, as different as you could ever have. And the toy department is closed today, folks, which is the world we live in sports. It's not even something you give a thought to today on a day when our country is under attack. Back after this.
WFAN New York.
Francesa on the Fan at 2:17. We're almost 6 hours into this devastation, and it really hasn't cleared up yet. We go to Warner Wolf in the city, who lives 7 blocks from what used to be the World Trade Center. Now it is a rubble, and Warner joins us now. Warner?
All right, Mike.
Warner, one thing here, let me update. New York City Police Department officials tell us now that the death toll is in the thousands. Which we expected, but in the thousands today.
Wow. Mike, I was just going over in my mind what I saw this morning. And, again, I'm not a fire expert, but the tower that was hit second.
The North Tower.
The number 2. I don't...
That's the North. The South was hit first. The North was hit second.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the one that went down first. And I remember saying to Imus, the difference in the burning, the fire was more. It was a huge. The North Tower, which is, you say, the first one which was hit, right?
No, the South was hit first.
Oh, the South was hit. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, the South was hit first.
The South was hit first.
Right.
When they were both still standing after both were hit, the South Tower, which is the one on the right, I'm looking south, it was just the smoke. It was more smoke than fire. But the other tower, the one was hit second, the North Tower?
Yes.
That was fire. That where you could see there was a huge difference. The one on the right was heavy smoke. The one on the left was fire. And, of course, the one on the left is the one that went down first. And then the problem is the only one standing, that smoke suddenly changed to black. It was like, my gosh, the blackest cloud you could ever see. And I don't know what that meant, but in minutes that one went down too.
You know, when I was watching television and they had someone on who was working for Lehman Brothers who was giving an account from downstairs about the tower and talking about and just as she was saying, it sounded like thunder.
Oh.
You heard her screech, and that's when the building collapsed. And it's funny, when we watched this, and not funny, ironic, but you saw these crazy things happening, the first plane, and then you watched the second plane happen on TV, as a lot of New York and a lot of America did, and you saw these two buildings standing there with these two holes in them.
Yeah.
But when the first one went down, there was almost a feeling in your stomach like now we had been totally violated. Now it was war. Now it was, it was almost like that they took the building down. It was almost like a symbol of that this can't stand, that they took, that they put a hole in a building, that unfortunately it's that one person gets hurt is a disaster. But when they destroyed the whole building, it was almost like this can't stand. That's all there is to it. I mean, this has to be dealt with.
You're absolutely right. There was a difference in time. As long as those buildings were standing,
I agree.
It was like, putting aside the deaths.
It's like they leveled New York today. It was like they came in and leveled the city.
Absolutely. As long as they were standing, it was horrible, but it was like, you can't beat us. We're still standing. But you're right, when they went down, that was a different game.
And how is it now? What can you tell me about right now at 2:21, almost 6 hours after the whole first catastrophe? What can you tell me now?
Well, I can tell you, looking out my window, the smoke is just still incredible. I've never seen smoke like this last for so long, and I don't know how longer it will last. It's just, the smoke that's what you notice. I mean, you can't go near this. It's just smoke. And, wow.
Mike, this is Christy here, Warner. I was going to add that officials were saying people really should stay out of the area, not only because of the danger, of course, of debris or whatever, but the smoke inhalation. A lot of people being taken in the hospital.
And they're saying the building was coated with asbestos when it was built, so that means there's also asbestos particles and gas that have been covered over, but was used when they built in those days. They used asbestos, and that is unbelievably dangerous as far as your lungs, as far as causing cancer. So anyone in that area, you should not be anywhere near there, because just taking that in can cause you serious harm.
Very dangerous.
You're right. That's a good point.
Well, I heard Bo say that with IMIS, and he said he worked on the building, and he said that all the girders were coated with asbestos and all the walls in those days, and they used to use it in those days, but they coated it over. But now this building was blown to smithereens, so all those asbestos particles are all out there now.
You know what, Mike? The smoke has gotten worse. It has absolutely gotten worse in the time I've been talking to you. It has turned black. Now, I don't know how the television shows it up, but I can tell you, I'm not that far from. It is black, and it's increased.
We're looking at a live shot, Warren, and you can see that you can't even see completely down the block. I mean, that's how bad it is. And you see these firefighters and these rescue workers just going through the smoke and the rubble. And, there are people in there they're never going to find. I mean, they're never going to find. There are bodies in there that they're just never going to be able to recover. You're talking about hundreds and hundreds of floors of just debris. I mean, it's unbelievable.
I was in Oklahoma City when that bombing happened. I was there I was working for a station in Arkansas. And the rescue workers, I mean, the task before them was just unbelievable, going back into that building. But this is being called a Herculean rescue task. I mean, they're going into the bottom, what's left of these buildings, and trying to, and then of course there's a concern of what could happen further, of any kind of a collapse or who knows what structural, if there is anything left, we don't even know.
And you're talking about a couple of hundred people in those buildings. You're talking about 25,000 people estimated to be in these two buildings. And you're talking about buildings that are a quarter mile high into the sky, two of them. I mean, you're talking about a task that is almost impossible. Really, to recover, almost impossible to figure out where people are and where they're buried and where they were. You can't even fathom recovering all these bodies. And right now, they put the death toll And this is, for people listening, and there's no one who listens or is in and out of our coverage who doesn't know someone. I mean, I know people, Warner knows people, everybody knows people who work in that building. I mean, and work in that area. I mean, no one knows exactly what's going on today. I mean, you just hope you hold your breath because there's thousands of people who were killed in that area today. They're already putting the death toll in the thousands in New York City.
Unbelievable. At that heaviest time of, rush hour time, when up to, they said, like 10,000 people in each building, then you've got on top of that visitors, so it's just impossible. And Mike, we've got some reaction from world leaders who are, of course, expressing horror and just sympathy for the victims in New York and D.C. Russian President Vladimir Putin expressing both deep sympathy and anger in a telegram to President Bush, and apparently has called on the entire international community to unite in this struggle against terrorism. British Prime Minister Tony Blair spoke out, condemning the attack on the United States.
This mass terrorism is the new evil in our world today. It is perpetrated by fanatics who are utterly indifferent to the sanctity of human life. And we, the democracies of this world, are going to have to come together to fight it together.
And Blair said that he was rushing back to London from, apparently he was at a trade union conference in response to that news. French foreign minister saying he was horrified by the news, and Berlin reacting with Germany's Security Council now set to convene. And Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat also sending his condolences to the U.S. In light of those attacks. Arafat says he is sad about the bombings, and he says we are completely shocked, calling it just simply unbelievable.
And at this time, Christy, no one, the FBI tells us that no one has laid claim to what happened in America today. And this is of such scale that this is actually an act of war. I don't think there will be the normal, typical, pound your chest claim, because they know this is of such magnitude that there will be a complete retaliation immediately if anybody does it. And as soon as they find out who they think did it, there's going to be complete retaliation, whether it's in Afghanistan or wherever it is, and it's going to happen, I think, rather swiftly. I would be shocked if it took 48 hours.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, one of the most respected military men in this country, Senator McCain, as you said, coming out, I think one of the first to say, this is absolutely a declaration of war.
Absolutely. You have to, and I think what will and you don't want to put the cart before the horse, because we're still digging out, and we're worried now about blood and really trying to just figure out where we are and if we're safe and things like that. But as soon as it is through the intelligence, the enormous, vast intelligence network that this country employs around the world, and it's vast. I mean, it's so complicated that none of us even know the beginning of it. But as soon as they put the blame where it's supposed to be, I think there will be enormous retaliation, and the country that is harboring these terrorists is either going to give them up or is going to face a severe situation. I mean, I think he's going to face war.
Yeah. I wanted to update also the situation with the flights around the country. About 50 commercial airliners, Mike, now in the U.S. apparently have reached their destinations. They are safely on the ground. And the FAA has now grounded all commercial flights after those terrorist attacks in the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Those flights that were already in the air were allowed to complete their journeys. And there are still a few international flights that have been cleared to land in the U.S. Other international flights have been diverted to Canada. So the FAA is saying that the national ground stop is going to be indefinite.
Thank you, Christy. All right, let's get you updated on where we are right now as we approach 2:30 here on the Mike and the Mad Dog program on a day as we will not experience many like him, and hopefully in our lifetime we won't again, and we never have in this country the kind of attack on this nation that was perpetrated today by obviously a terrorist group, one that is vast in its reach and in its resources, and today put forth the kind of terrorist attack that has been written about, that has been talked about, that has been speculated, but never, I think, did anyone believe could be executed in this country with the swiftness and the efficiency that it was today. And, this is almost like some bad movie, somebody's dream. I mean, there have been books that have come close to this kind of stuff, but to use the resources of the commercial airlines of the United States to pull off what was mass destruction in our city and in D.C. and to wreak havoc throughout this country in what was in no less than an act of war is just almost unfathomable, and that's where we are. A horrific situation in New York where the NYPD now tells us the death toll is in the thousands. The country is on complete military alert. We're talking about threat condition Delta, which is the highest possible condition of readiness for armed forces both in the United States and around the world. That means you have warships, you have aircraft carriers off our coast, New York, Washington. You have the United States Air Force around the world on alert, in the air. You have all kinds of weapons, including weapons of mass destruction, on the ready. I mean, this is as close to being at war as you can be in this country, and in essence, I would say right now, as the military minds, the Joint Chiefs, the CIA, and everyone who deals with terrorism and deals with these threats, and around the world now our greatest threats come from terrorist groups, not from countries, not from organized nations, that there is no question we are probably as close to war as we have been in this country. Now, you want to get into the Gulf War. The Gulf War was not a war, okay? That was a little military action. We're probably as close to war with some nation in this world than we've probably been since the Cuban Missile Crisis, because I would not be surprised that if they don't give, the country does not give these terrorists up, that we will be at war very quickly. Maybe, I don't expect other countries to be choosing sides. I don't expect a world demonstration or a world war, but I would not be surprised if there is a serious action in the next 24 to 48 hours in this country. Now, as far as immediately in our area, we're hoping that there's safety for the people and that they can save as many lives as they can. New York City hospitals need blood desperately, so if you're within walking distance, go walk to a hospital and give blood. And if you're trying to get out of the city, and hopefully not into the city in any way, but trying to get around the city or out of the city, let's go to Lori.
Okay, Mike, pedestrians now are being allowed to walk one way across the Williamsburg and Brooklyn bridges, and that's going into Brooklyn, not Manhattan-bound. 59th Street Bridge, same thing. You can walk into Queens, but they're not letting anyone walk into Manhattan. Still no way to get into Manhattan right now. All bridges and tunnels are closed. No trains running into or around Manhattan, and no time frame for how long everything's going to stay closed. Now, Metro North, you can get a train at Grand Central. Limited service, but they are running there, and you've got a limited ferry service leaving Manhattan from Pier 11 at West 30th Street. That'll take you to Hoboken. No Amtrak service between New York and Washington, and no Amtrak trains going into Manhattan. Southbound BQE, very heavy, barely moving all the way around. Southbound Belt going to Verrazano, that's bumper to bumper, complete parking lot from Cross Bay Boulevard. And at the Verrazano, heading into Staten Island bound, that opens. Tolls are not being collected. Brooklyn bound, it's closed. Jersey bound, Bayonne, Goethals, Bayonne bridges, all open, but Staten Island bound, they remain closed.
Thank you, Lori. Now, here's where Senator John McCain said, and I totally agree. He told CNN, this is obviously an act of war that has been carried out in the United States of America. McCain said that that this is a situation so serious that words can't describe them, that this can't be these attacks cannot be looked on in any other way but as an act of war that warrants that type of national response. I couldn't agree more in any way. We hope that the people responsible for these horrific events will suffer the full measure of our justice, and I believe that that's what's going to happen here. There is no way the United States can blink, and now, finally, those terrorists, those groups, those liquid, almost invisible groups that you hear about, that you don't know much about. You hear the names. You know they have resources. You hear about their terrorist camps and what they can do. Well, they finally have done it, and they've done it on our shores, and now we have to retaliate the same way we would retaliate if a country attacked us. And if a country had attacked us this morning in this vein, we would be at war right now. We would have declared war within an hour. We would have declared war. And we have to declare war, I think, on these terrorists now, and the countries that harbor them have to be dealt with just like we're at war. Congressman, this just from AP, a congressman says an apparently hijacked plane that crashed in Pennsylvania may have been headed for Camp David. Virginia Democrat James Moran says he got this information from the Marines. He says the hijacked plane that went down in western Pennsylvania was meant to crash at Camp David. Now, two other planes, as we know, crashed into the World Trade Center. Another crashed into the Pentagon. The fourth plane was probably, we don't know this, but you wonder if on the way to its mark, was it taken down by our own planes? Who knows? That's seriously just speculation right now. A lot of the stuff is still speculation, but there are things we do know. What we do know is that the planes that were hijacked, the 4 of them, there were 266 people aboard, including crew and passengers, and all the people on those planes have perished. American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767 en route from Boston to L.A., crashed into the World Trade Center. It was carrying 81 passengers, 9 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. The American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757 en route from Dulles Airport near Washington to L.A., crashed into the World Trade Center. That was the second one. The plane was carrying 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. United Airlines Flight 93, a Boeing 757, crashed southeast of Pittsburgh. That was the plane we just discussed. That it has been rumored, reportedly, that plane was headed for Camp David. That plane was originating from Newark, was headed to San Francisco. These were all transcontinental airlines, all with enormous amounts of fuel because they're going across the whole country, east to west. The plane was carrying 38 passengers, 2 pilots, and 5 flight attendants. And then United Airlines 175, a Boeing 767. The flight was bound from Boston to L.A., so was Flight 11. It was carrying 56 passengers, 2 pilots, 7 flight attendants. The airline would not say where that plane crashed. Let's listen to the governor, Pataki, and Mayor Giuliani. That's Governor Pataki and Mayor Giuliani, obviously discussing New York and the impact it has had on our city. The skies are now clear. The 50 commercial airliners in the U.S. have reached their destination safely on the ground, so the Federal Aviation Administration now feels confident, and the United States military now feel confident that they have now secured American airspace. The New York airspace has been completely cordoned off. I'm sure Washington, D.C. has been completely cordoned off. They will not bring the president back into D.C. until the White House has been fortified completely by air and ground. They will probably do that or have already done it. Then they will bring the president back and plop him in a situation room at the White House with his staff, but they will wait till they completely by land and by air have completely secured the White House from any possible attack. And they say now airspace in the United States is now completely safe. See, usually you cannot get a plane in any way. You cannot get a plane in that's, bringing contraband, bringing drugs, or an unmarked plane or anything like that in. You could maybe fly an international airliner that is scheduled, and if it were hijacked like these planes were today, these were not international, these were domestic flights. They were all east to west transcontinental flights carrying a lot of fuel. That's why they were hit. So that's where we stand right now. The airspace in the United States has been secured. All the commercial airlines have reached their destination. Now, anyone who needs any information from United Airlines, 1-800-245-8555. That's United Airlines, 1-800-245-8555. If you are still trying to locate a person, the best way to do that is through the Red Cross. They have that operation in place. Cherney will get me that number. So we'll give you that when we can, too. I know the phone lines in the city are very, very tough to get through because of the amount of use in the city. Otherwise, on the roads right now, the Tappan Zee Bridge is open. Path trains are still shut down, but the Tappan Zee Bridge is open in both directions. That's the Tappan Zee Bridge, though, which obviously is still outside the environs of New York. You can get out of the city. You can't get into the city. In essence, is where we stand right now. We're back after this.
WFAN New York.
The number for American Airlines, if you have any questions, 1-800-245-0999. United Airlines, 1-800-245-8555. It has been just a bizarre day, and it started early in this morning, and manning the controls was Charles McCord along with Eyewitness, and they were here for a long time, and the newsman extraordinaire joins me now, and Chuck, as this whole thing starts to wind down from the first phase, we're kind of in that limbo period now as we await to hear what our government is going to do. Now they have secured airspace, probably secured our nation, at least from any air attacks. We can never say there's not another stray bomb somewhere, but probably the wave, which was so brilliantly orchestrated and executed, is probably over because it happened so swiftly. Don't you feel now that it's probably been completed by the terrorist groups and completed very, very efficiently?
Anything we say, of course, is only speculation at this point, but you do just kind of get the sense, accurate or not, that, as you described it, Mikey, that the initial phase of this horrific day probably has concluded, as you were reporting a few minutes ago, with the successful termination of the flights, the 50 or so flights that were still airborne, all reaching their destinations. But I suppose in my wildest imagination, in all the years that I've been doing this, 35, 36 plus, that I would ever witness anything like this. There's nothing to compare it to. I mean, it's unprecedented. So you really do grope for words because nothing in your experience has prepared you for this.
You know, it's been written, whether it was Clancy, no matter who. I mean, these ideas have been fostered that there could be an attack, but even the State Department, with little they've leaked out today that we've heard, cannot believe the efficiency, the delicate timing, and just how precise this was. I mean, they almost can't believe, they're almost stunned that someone could pull off such an efficient attack on our country.
I think the government is in shock and the nation is in shock. I don't, as somebody was, and I've heard so much this morning for so many, that there was a terrorist attack on U.S. soil given the current time, the current tenor, surprised nobody. The magnitude and this utter, down to the second precision and the planning has shocked everybody.
As you would say, to bring as you were saying to me in the newsroom, we're talking with Charles McCord, I'm Mike Francesa, WFN in New York, to have the planes sink to the point that they could hit and be at the right destination. These are commercial airliners coming from different cities. To hit within minutes of each other is unbelievable.
Right, and just goes to the kind of planning that these people went through to coordinate timetables and schedules and to look at which airline and which company would be destined for where at what time so that they could, all of this could occur within what? An hour? And certainly.
And to take transcontinental flights,
right,
domestic flights, transcontinental flights that have huge amounts of fuel.
Yep, knowing that they would be at maximum fuel capacity.
And probably to have, and again, always speculation, but you would figure they probably had to infiltrate airlines, airports. I mean, this must have been years in the making. And they said a year minimum. I think it probably had to be years in the making.
It could have been, Mike. It could have been since what was the failure in their minds of the initial attack on the World Trade Center, in that it did not bring the Trade Center down. The bomb in the garage. Could have been planned from that time forward that, well, we must correct this and next time we will complete it.
And Charles, isn't it, and you and I talked about this off the air, isn't it interesting from just a weird feeling point of view, that they saw those Twin Towers as their targets of what America stood to them for so long. They went after them once, they went after them again. I mean, to them, absolutely, those Twin Towers meant something to them as to what America was. Capitalism, the richness, the bigness, the boldness of America. They wanted to take down those Twin Towers.
They were twin icons of this society and culture, without doubt. The tallest, the grandest, and to them, the ultimate target. Simply in the title alone, the World Trade Center. So...
let's go to Christy quickly. Go ahead, Christy. What do you have?
Mike, we were talking earlier about the possibility of asbestos and that concern with debris that was falling after the World Trade Center buildings collapsed. Well, evidently, some workers and residents leaving Lower Manhattan via ferry service are apparently getting hosed down as they get off the boat in New Jersey, because officials are concerned about that very thing that you were saying, that asbestos contamination, and possibly these, soot-covered passengers might have... gotten some stuff on them that would be possibly hazardous to their health. So, and
that's what Bo said before, Charles, and that is that he knew that asbestos was used on all those buildings at that time when they were built. Yeah. It's been outlawed since, but it's been covered up, but it's in that building, and when it exploded, there's no question there's asbestos particles that were floating around New York this morning.
It was encapsulated by federal statute and regulation. That's the way they had to handle the... where it's just too difficult to remove, encapsulated. Well, the encapsulation was also obliterated when the buildings came down, so a lot of that stuff probably did get freed into the atmosphere.
More also from that press conference that Mayor Giuliani and Governor Pataki are actually still giving right now, but some more interesting facts that they released. Evidently, the building, they believe that the buildings collapsed as an effect of the planes that hit them, not because of some other bomb. That's what they were alluding to.
And they had said that, and Charles had alluded to this morning, and the architect, they had one of the architects on TV, he said those buildings were made to withstand the hit of a 750 or 67 plane.
Wow.
They didn't do it. They said they could withstand those hits, that they were built to withstand those hits in case of an accident, but obviously it didn't happen.
You wonder, too, if there were, like, bombs on the board the planes that were detonated at
That's
the time.
possible, too. I mean, but they, as everyone alluded to today, and I heard Charles say first, and that is that you got to remember how much fuel those planes have, because they're going to California. They have an enormous amount of fuel.
Right. Also, another sad note here, we don't have the number of casualties, but Mayor Giuliani did say that firefighters and police officers were apparently among the casualty, and we don't have a number on that. Also, an update on the situation with schools. Where did I have that information? The schools are still open. They're going to be going on, normal schedule. If parents are not there to pick up their children, the kids are going to be taken to a center where parents can pick them up later. So I'm sure that information will be released on specifics and whatnot. But schools are operating normal schedule.
Thanks, Christy. All right, now, the other things that we do know, the National Guard has been called in New York City. I know you're aware of that already. The governor has declared a state of disaster. The president will declare a federal disaster for New York. He hasn't yet. That obviously is important for funding and for different health and all different kind of services. So that will probably happen. We don't know about buildings open tomorrow, federal, county buildings, about what's going to happen with the stock exchanges and everything. They have not made any decisions for tomorrow yet. The way Giuliani talked, it's almost like he wants to get back to business normally tomorrow. That might be impossible, Charles. I mean, down in the financial district, it might be totally impossible.
I can't imagine it. As a matter of fact, Michael, just looking at the streets surrounding this scene of utter devastation, can't imagine him getting back to. But understandable that he would like to get back to normalcy as quickly as possible, just to send that message.
Yes, that we can just get past it, and that's why I had this feeling. Charles and I was stating this to Warner before when he called in. And that is that when the building went down, you almost got a worse feeling than when the building was hit. It's almost like you violated some American institution, and now that was almost the act of war when they dropped the building, which wherever in the world they were monitoring this, they were ecstatic that they dropped that building. I mean, to them, that was like the highlight of their lives that they dropped that building.
Sheer jubilation for them. Absolutely. Absolutely. No question. One thing, it struck me and others, if by some chance on these two aircraft that were involved in this horrific episode this morning in New York City, the black boxes survived, and the flight data recorder, the cockpit voice recorder. The flight data recorder probably wouldn't show anything because we know exactly what happened. We watched it. Right. But the cockpit voice recorders, during the moment when these airplanes were commandeered, that could be very revealing, some really significant information as to who, in fact, is culpable and what has happened.
And what happened to the pilots, and everyone has made the statements, including the government, that those pilots would not, in their estimate, have flown, and I don't know this, but they would not have flown those planes into the World Trade Center. They would have taken a bullet first before they would have driven those planes or flown those planes into those buildings.
Highly unlikely. I can't imagine pilots of...
Well, you're going down anyway. I mean, you're basically they're saying which way you want to die. You might as well take the bullet because why try to kill everybody? You're going to hit the building anyway.
Yeah, but just the kind of people who are in the cockpits of our airliners, I can't imagine.
Neither can I.
No.
I totally agree. Let's get traffic. We want to update you on traffic. Charles will hang around for a minute. We want to get you updated on everything going on, whether you're in the city or trying to get out of the city. Don't try to get into the city, though. We know that. Here's Lori.
Okay, Mike. Well, right now, the Circle Line is providing free ferry service from West 42nd Street right next to the Intrepid. It will take you over to Weehawken. Waterway ferries have some limited service, too, and that's from Pier 11 on West 30th Street. That will take you over to Hoboken. Still can't get into Manhattan from any approaches. No subways going in. All bridges and tunnels are closed. No trains running in and around Manhattan. And no word yet on when that's going to change, when they'll be reopened. Pedestrians are being allowed to walk one way across the Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and 59th Street bridges. That's leaving Manhattan. No one's being allowed to walk across any bridge going into Manhattan. In New Jersey, eastbound Route 4 is shut down at Jones Road in Englewood. Eastbound 46 closed at 5th Street in Fort Lee. Eastbound Route 3 also blocked off at the New Jersey Turnpike's western spur, and northbound 1 and 9 closed across the Pulaski Skyway. Southbound side very crowded through the area. All the approaches to the George Washington Bridge and Holland and Lincoln tunnels are closed. Now, the outbound upper level of the George has been reopened. Lower deck and inbound side still shut down. Holland and Lincoln tunnels shut down both ways.
Thank you, Laurie. And Charles, interestingly, no one has run the claim responsibility for any part of this. As a matter of fact, the groups have tried to run away from this.
Just as information, the senior official from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, this DFLP, that earlier an anonymous caller had said that the DFLP had bore some sort of responsibility. They're now backing away from it, vehemently denying, in fact, according to this information, that the group had any responsibility, saying the story released on Abu Dhabi television by an anonymous person is totally incorrect. That's the quote. And they quote a senior official from that organization saying the DFLP is against hijacking planes and against endangering the lives of civilians who are not connected with the struggle of this region, end quote.